Many of you already know me. I am Dr. Cordula Dick-Muehlke. I am the Director of Education here at UCI Mind. But more important than me, of course, are our panelists who have come today. And I'm going to first introduce Steve and Jinsey Hines. Steve was diagnosed at age 58 through Talbot Medical Group. And he's 58 now, and he was diagnosed in 2009 through Talbot Medical Group, and he received confirmation of that diagnosis at UCI Mind in 2010. Further evaluation led to identification of dementia with Lewy bodies as the possible underlying cause of his MCI. He grew up in Arcadia, went to Pasadena City College and Cal Pomona. He worked for the Navy in intelligence and surveillance for 6 years before moving on to McDonnell Douglas, where he designed and built airplanes for 12 years. And interestingly enough, Steve actually developed these airplane kits that he sent to China, and then via telephone, he coached the Chinese in building these airplanes. After a very successful career in aerospace, Steve landed at Disney, where, in his own words, he created the magic and kept it going. Steve and his engineering team were responsible for maintaining the park, the safety of the rides, and keeping the illusion going, in his words. These days, as you'll hear, Steve is doing everything he can to prevent his MCI from progressing, including taking classes, volunteering, and speaking out as an advocate. Steve met Jinsey, his wife of 22 years, on a blind date. Jinsey has a master's degree in business and spent many years working in a variety of high-level administrative positions for companies like FHP and Parker Hannifin. Today, Jinsey focuses on raising their 15-year-old son, Robert, supporting Steve, and volunteering in the community. Esther and Joe Goff. Esther was diagnosed with MCI, and in this case, it's believed that her amnestic MCI may be due to underlying contributing factors of Parkinson's disease, depression, and sleep apnea. Esther is 74. She's a native Californian. She was born in southeast LA and in the area known as Watts now, and grew up in Temple City. She also attended Pasadena City College, and a friend of Joe's introduced him to Esther when he was stationed at Maywood. During his 20 years in the Air Force, the couple moved around a lot. Finally, they ended up in Kentucky, which was one of Joe's last assignments. And that's where Esther became interested in nursing, working for the Council for Southern Mountains, and she actually went out and did health fairs for the people of Appalachia. Ultimately, this led her to study nursing at Eastern Kentucky University. After Joe retired from the Air Force in 1974, the couple moved out here to California, and Esther became the director of obstetrics at Mission Hospital. She got a little burned out on nursing, so she decided to pursue a career in real estate and became active in the Saddleback Valley Board of Realtors. She served on multiple committees and as president, and she was selling real estate until 2007. She also loves politics. She served as an assessment appeals hearing officer. This couple has been married for 56 years with 3 daughters and 2 grandchildren. Joe is originally from Canton, Ohio, and he obtained a degree in business administration after he retired from the Navy. He went to California State University, Los Angeles, and initially he worked in corporate accounting for about a decade, but for the past 27 years, he's had his own practice in Tustin. He's an enrolled agent and certified financial planner. Now their couple run the business, but Joe and Esther still enjoy helping out a few hours a week. I'm really pleased to also introduce Rhoda, who's 73 right now, and was also diagnosed with amnestic mild cognitive impairment here at UCI Mind, and that was in 2007. And the most likely underlying cause of her MCI is Alzheimer's. Rhoda was adopted at birth and grew up in Chicago, where she started high school, and 3 moves later to Madison, Wisconsin, West LA, and then Northern California, she graduated. She ended up going to Stanford, where during the first week she met Jim. Now, it wasn't quite love at first sight, because I understand a little bit rocky for a while. The relationship had its ups and downs, but they eventually married in 1961. Jim went to Yale for medical school, and Rhoda stayed in Stanford to pursue a master's degree in audiology, and she graduated with great distinction. After their marriage, Rhoda worked in speech pathology and audiology while Jim finished medical school. They returned to Stanford for Jim's internship. Then they went to Denver, where he completed his residency in psychiatry at the University of Colorado. During those years, the couple had their 3 children. Following his training, Jim was drafted into the Air Force, and he served 2 years as a psychiatrist in Texas. In 1972, they ended up here in Newport Beach. Jim established a private practice, and Rhoda worked there for many years as full-time office manager until they retired in 2001. Both Rhoda and Jim are very community-minded. While raising the children, Rhoda volunteered for National Charity League and Newport Mesa PTA. She was actually the leader of both those organizations. And they currently, as well, Jim has served on many boards, including at Mariners Church, and they currently co-lead a grief group at their church on an annual basis, and together they enjoy their 8 grandchildren. Finally, I'd like to introduce Jay, who is 86, who was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment due to dementia with Lewy bodies in March 2010 at UCI Mind. He grew up in Pittsburgh, and then after high school, he volunteered for the Merchant Marines, served in World War II, and he was actually ferrying fuel in the South China Sea during the time of the Battle of Okinawa. Upon his return, he entered the University of Pittsburgh, completed a BA in history, and then a law degree. He practiced in Pittsburgh and joined the Air Force Reserves. He was called into active duty in 1957 as a Judge Advocate General Corps, into the Judge Advocate General Corps, and he served for 2 years in Morocco. Then in the 1960s, Jay moved to Sacramento, California as a civilian Judge Advocate General officer, and that's where he met Judy, and they have been married for 49 years. He began his career as counsel in the aerospace industry, and that was first at Lytton, and then Ford Aerospace, and then Northrop. During this time, he remained in the active reserves, retired from the Air Force as a full colonel in 1973 after 31 years of commissioned service. He's been a history buff. He enjoys presenting on World War II, and in fact, on October 18th, he's going to present a film of the Battle of Midway for the Osher Lifelong Learning UCI Extension classes. What's really interesting, Jay has always enjoyed writing stories. He's written a historical novel in which the main character sees things that aren't there, and that's something that Jay himself is experiencing for real right now. He's been very dedicated to what kind of nonverbals is he giving me behind my back? Oh. That book is still going to be published, right, Jay?
Oh, yes, I hope.
And Jay's also been on the board for the Blind Children's Learning Center and Arts and Services for the Disabled. Judy has also had a wonderful career. She studied at the University of Utah and the University of Grenoble in France. She taught French and English as a second language for several years while Jay and Judy were moving around California. They finally settled in Cupertino, where Judy became involved in politics, eventually serving as a planning commissioner and as the press secretary to a state senator. When they moved to Newport Beach, she worked as a legislative aide to one of our assemblymen. She gained public relations skills and eventually became senior VP for the Weiss Group. For the last 28 years, She's been an independent publicist, and she continues to provide public relations support for one client, the Garden Grove Strawberry Festival. She's also served on the board of the Orange County Interfaith Shelter for the past 27 years. So I'd like you to welcome our panel. One comment that I want to make and recognize that between the four gentlemen who are on the panel today represent 59 years of service in the U.S. military. 31 years, 2 years, 20 years, and 6 years. And that service has been an important part of discussion and something I really wanted to recognize today as we started out. So we're going to start out by very, very briefly touching on what the cognitive symptoms are that you're experiencing. But we really don't want to spend a lot of time on that because we want to talk about those non-cognitive behavioral and psychiatric symptoms we've been talking about today. So Rhoda, tell me a little bit about how MCI is affecting your memory and thinking abilities. And make sure to speak in the mic for me.
Thank you. That's been best. I think one of the biggest things is just remembering day-to-day scheduling, things that I would normally have no problem with, and we still have a very busy life. I find it disappointing. Jim and I will review schedule from time to time during the day, even more than once, and I will be surprised that I didn't recall that. And later in the evening, something will come up, and I'll say, "Did you tell me that?" And he'll say, "Yes." And I'll say, "When?" And it could have been the day before, but it was very likely that morning or some other time. So that has been very demoralizing to me, and I've had to sort of come to acceptance of it. In the meantime, somewhere in this early stage, I learned that I was reconnected with my birth mother, and then learned that she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and was cared for at home, the home of two other, actually, full sisters. So I just have had a slow process of understanding where I am, not wanting anyone to know because I enjoy certain things. I enjoy bridge, for one thing, and I have felt that there would be things that I wouldn't be welcome in, which is silly. Friends have been wonderful, and not that they know, but they will after today.
Jim, anything else on particularly on the memory and thinking abilities?
No, I think she put it very well. I think it's really forgetting plans, and the other thing is losing things. Probably on a daily basis, there's something that's misplaced, and we work on finding it. Sometimes it's small things, sometimes it's big things. If it's a small thing, we get over it quickly. If it's a big thing, it takes a while, but those are the two main things.
Thank you. And Esther, now we're fine. Esther, go ahead and focus on your memory and thinking abilities.
Hi. My main problem is forgetting things or not even recalling, and it has to do with social events. I have absolutely no problems with activity of daily living, driving, reading maps, anything technical. But bring up a social event or something we attended or something that was said, and it's just not there. I just have a blank where prior I was able to even close my eyes and visualize the event or whatever it was, and right down to the details of what maybe you were wearing. So it's really weird in that sense, and it's very frustrating. I just don't have the details anymore, but like I said, my activities of daily living, you wouldn't know. It's just same as always, no problem at all.
Joe, what do you want to add about the memory and thinking?
Well, she has a real hard time with people's names. We belong to a car club, and we see the people 3 or 4 times a month at least, and she still doesn't remember the names, and we've been members about 5 years. And then she doesn't remember trips. We went to Germany 2 years ago. We go back to Ohio almost every year to visit my family, and she just doesn't remember going at all.
Now, Steve, we're I guess, hypothesizing that your MCI may be due to dementia with Lewy bodies, and you seem to have a wider range of memory and thinking difficulties. So could you share a bit of what you experienced with the audience?
Well, basically, what I first noticed was that I would replace people's names with their job positions because I couldn't remember their names, even though I'd been working with them for 10 years. Reading and writing got very difficult. I'd have my good days and bad days. And basically, decisions. I used to make 20 decisions at a time, and now I basically could not make what I wanted to drink for dinner.
Yeah, and could you talk a little bit just about how, you know, you have a difficulty interpreting the situation, like your radar doesn't work?
I think it's hard to hear you.
So, hard to hear me? Okay. Okay. All righty. All right, thanks, Frank. A little bit about how your radar doesn't work?
Basically, I don't have the emotional ability to understand really what's going on or follow the emotions of everybody. And so I basically look towards my wife to go, how should I interpret the situation? And so that was basically one of the problems. I could normally size up a situation real quick, and I've lost that ability to realize what's going on. So if my wife all of a sudden starts panicking, I start panicking. So it's
Yeah. Jincy, anything to add in terms of memory or thinking abilities?
And through trial and error, I've learned don't panic. But other than that, Steve summed it up very well.
Yeah, so Jay, now I'm going to come down to you.
If you dare.
If I dare. I hope you all pick that up, if I dare. Yeah, memory and thinking abilities. How's the MCI, again, due to dementia with Lewy bodies, affect that memory and thinking?
Well, first of all, I want to say this. Welcome to the Academy Awards.
All right. Well, I'm gonna fess up right front that Jay and I have a little deal. Now, Jay loves history, and so during our meetings, he would share a lot of history. Somehow, in between all these questions, and he and I have a little agreement that if he wanders off into history, I get to pull the cane, right? So, memory and thinking abilities, Jay.
I apologize, Cornelia. That's the last time I'll do it.
Oh, okay. Just in case you noticed me.
I just couldn't resist it.
All right. Memory and thinking abilities. What's happening?
Well, my short-term memory is it's gone into the toilet. I can't remember what happened yesterday. My long-term memory is still pretty good. I can tell you who played Gunga Din in a 1935 movie. And you name it, and I think I'll probably know who it is. And I remember, which adds to my ability to read a history book and recall the history and retain the history. And that's why I love this subject, because but it's profoundly affected my law practice.
Okay, we're going to stay in the here and now, Jay.
Okay.
So let's talk about how it's affecting. Why don't you shift to reading?
Well, the problem I've had with reading is that I pick up in the past, I've been able to read a novel in an afternoon or on a weekend without any trouble at all. And now I start to read, and I lost my kindle. I don't know what happened to it. And that shows you how dumb I am. My memory just doesn't bring it back to me. I can't bring up the words anymore. And it bothers me that I've always been an inveterate public speaker, and I've done a lot of teaching in history and business law and subjects like that.
Okay, I'm going to pass the mic to Judy. Or keep in my deal, because we're going to move on to some other things that I want you to talk about. And so, Judy, what else do you want to add about the memory and thinking abilities?
Okay. Mainly, he doesn't remember the schedule for the day. I can tell him in the morning and in the afternoon. He has no clue as to what the schedule is. He asks me frequently what that is. His biggest difficulty is he's lost, because of the Lewy body, he's lost his spatial concepts. So it's really hard for him to judge where to sit when he gets to a chair, whether the concrete is a step or it's not a step, the difference in colors, it's confusing for him. So he walks very tentatively, even though he's physically able to walk well. He's tentative because he can't tell what his eyes are not giving him good messages. Before he was diagnosed, about 2 years before he was diagnosed, he lost his sense of direction. And he used to have an incredible sense of direction. He always knew how to get from one place to another. That disappeared about 2 years before he was diagnosed. Most of the time he's really okay. He's kind of himself. But with Lewy body, it fluctuates, so sometimes he's much worse than others.
One thing that happens a lot with Jay and happens a little bit with Steve is that we see cognitive fluctuations, and they were mentioned earlier today, I believe, where sometimes you have a great day and you're just like normal, and other times the cognitive impairment is really evident. And caregivers of people with dementia with Lewy bodies have called that phenomenon showtime, because there are times where the person just seems normal as if they were themselves. So now we're going to talk about some non-cognitive symptoms of MCI that these individuals are experiencing. And we're going to start with another key early feature of dementia with Lewy bodies, which is hallucinations. And so I'm going to go down here to Steve first to ask him to talk about his experience of seeing cats.
Well, one of the problems I had, I tripped over our cat. It was a white cat and had a little bow tie, and I tripped over it and grabbed the curtains, and I fell, and my wife kind of, I did a good fall, and I was worried about that it hurt the cat because I fell pretty hard. We don't have a white cat. Ours is black and white, and I didn't realize that, and it was basically, I'm not sure what I tripped over, but then I would also see in the room a lot of cats moving around in the room, and we still only have one cat. So that was my opportunities for illusion, and that was just what the disease does.
Yeah, and Jincy, do you want to add to that description?
Yes, our son would like him to stop taking the medication that makes him see only one cat because he wants extra cats. But the other interesting thing was a couple of times, Steve's sleeping soundly, like, as soundly as any of us sleep. And strange things twice happened at night. One time he was basically kicking me in the body, and what are you doing? And of course, he can't really tell you at that point. And he told me later he dreamed he was hurtling over the garage door as it was closing. Now, I haven't had that dream, but when I dream, I don't think I'm hurtling over the person next to me in bed. And when we explained the extra cats, well, when Steve explained the extra cats to the doctor, it was the first time I heard it. But we've corrected that situation. And when I explained about the hurtling over me in bed, that kind of led them to the possibility that it's a dementia with Lewy bodies. But as I told Cordula the first time, I don't buy it.
And so you might remember this morning Dr. Pierce mentioned this phenomenon called REM sleep disorder, and that's when the individual acts out their dreams. So we're going to come back here now, and I'm going to ask Jay, who also has MCI due to dementia with Lewy bodies, to share his experience, because hallucinations have basically become part of his regular everyday life. So could you please describe an episode?
Yeah, I woke up one night and I thought I heard we're on a green belt in South Orange County here, and I thought I heard a lot of voices outside, and I flipped up the blind, and there was a whole troop of cavalry. Seriously, a whole troop of French cavalry. And I don't know what movie I've been watching, but I love movies. And I could see the details on them. I could actually see what uniforms they had on, and I didn't necessarily see any of the faces, but I recognized they were French, and I knew the British cavalry from the Charge of the Light Brigade. So I knew they weren't British. Some of the other things that I run into is a few weeks before this whole thing started, I started to see faces in the bushes and in the trees, and actual people. And I would drive up there and nothing, no people, nothing. And I've continued to get illusions. For example, I see a whole troop of kids marching around on the Greenbelt, and when I get down, by the time I get down there to find out what they want, they're not there anymore.
Right, and could you talk about how this makes you feel? The cavalry and the group of children who sometimes you call a gang?
Well, I've never been fearful in my life, I don't think, I've always never objected to staying home alone. I can't be in the house anymore. It reminds me of the movie The Haunting, in which the house would come down and take you. I'm sorry. Okay.
All right, let's stay on this feeling of fear and what you express sometimes feelings of feeling under siege.
Yeah, I get the feeling that I've got gang members all over living in every direction, and that I'm going to be killed. But so far, that's ridiculous. I have to admit, that's been ridiculous.
But it's hard to tell what's real from what's unreal.
That's the biggest problem, telling the real from the unreal. And you know how you do it? If you don't think it's real, it ain't real. You are looking at something which is an illusion, and it'll be very real to you. I don't know if you get dialogue in your illusion, but it'll be very real in you, and it'll look like something's going on and something's happening, and something is going on and something's happening, which fortunately you'll wake up from.
Yeah, and Jay, I want to ask you to talk about one more thing that's a little bit sensitive, but we agree to be okay, can you tell us about what happens when you start to feel like Judy's been unfaithful?
Well, that's a shocker to me. I wake up in the middle of the night and I hear voices, or the phone ring and then voices or something like that, and I'll go downstairs and look around the house and nothing's happening. But I then accuse her of having an affair, for which I profoundly apologize later on, because, you know, I really had no evidence of an affair at all. It just didn't exist. And I had the poor taste in my Booba Louie, or whatever it is.
Bubba Louie is his nickname for dementia with Lewy bodies. So Jay's good about keeping everything in perspective.
Well, you know, people ask me, what do you do?
Go ahead.
What do you
Finish
do
up.
to cope with this thing?
We're going to pause. We're going to come back. We're going to talk
Okay.
about coping in a little bit.
Okay.
I'm going to let Judy finish up and talk about the experience, the episodes.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons I had him diagnosed is because the very first thing was we've been married for almost 50 years, and he accused me of cheating on him. And I just knew that was not him. It's just not his real person. So we went and also accused me of taking his money. And so we had him diagnosed, and I've been learning a lot about Lewy body ever since, and that seems to be a very common symptom. He frequently hears things that aren't there, sees things that aren't there. He even smells things that are not there. He thinks there's poison gas in the bedroom being pumped in by the gang, and we have to put on a fan to blow the poison gas out. He washes a glass out before he uses it because he doesn't know if someone's put something into his food. He's very suspicious about all kinds of things, and this doesn't. This happens in a fluctuating basis as well. Happens periodically. Sometimes it's not so intense. Most of the time he's pretty mellow, but when these things happen to him, it's very scary, and he does get angry, and sometimes expresses his anger by banging his fist on the bed or banging it on a couch, but he never And then later on he goes, oh, it must have been an episode. I'm sorry. So on some level, he really realizes that it's not real. But when it's happening, it's extremely real to him.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Now we're going to move on from hallucinations, which is something that occurs early in dementia with Lewy bodies, but occurs, if it occurs more in the moderate to severe stages if hallucinations occur in Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. But we're going to talk a bit about depression, and depression is something that Jay and Rhoda and Esther and Steve have all had to cope with. And so, Rhoda, I was going to ask you if you could talk a little bit about the feelings of that you experience.
In terms of depression? Well, actually, I feel fairly fortunate that that's not been extreme yet. I remember I had a friend when I was a young girl who she would say, in talking with an aunt, the aunt was quite a character, and she'd say this and that and the other thing, and the aunt would, kind of disregard or brush off what she'd said. And she would say that this, not to my friend necessarily, but to other friends or people in the family. They would say, well, I'm not as dumb as I look. And she'd say, oh, dear, you couldn't be. So I've always remembered that, is there's that sort of desire now to say that to people. I'm not as dumb as I look, because it's a game with me. I think, we're all in different stages and places, as you can hear from here, but I try not to let this be known. And so when people converse with you, and then it's gone within a short period of time, and I'm trying to fancy footwork around trying to show that I was interested, which I was, truly. I truly am, but it just won't come back to me. So that's a suffering kind of a place.
That is a
Not so
suffering.
much at home, because Jim is a patient man and he understands, but since nobody else really knows until today, then we'll, have to go from there.
Right. And could you share a little bit, and that is a suffering place, could you share a little bit what we talked about grieving? Grieving your losses and the sense of loss that you sometimes feel.
I do, yeah, I do grieve. I don't know if you're speaking of, I spend every morning, and have for many, many years, just going down to a quiet place downstairs in my kitchen, actually, where I can see out a lovely view, and just listening. And it's usually right at sunrise or sometime around in there. And so that's when I have a chance to kind of meditate on what's happening, and remembering who I was and who I am now.
Right.
And coming to grips with that in a spiritual way. I mean, I frankly would be lost without a sense of a strength that's certainly far greater than I, or what all scientists who are wonderful know, and who are working so hard in this field. So I guess, is that what we talked about? Is that what you're thinking of?
That was a little bit of what we talked
Yeah.
about. And I'm going to ask you to pass it to Jim. And one of the things I want to point out, and some of you may have already noticed this, is that sadly there's this self-attribution that occurs, or this feeling of people perceiving me as dumb. And so we're going to come back to that in a minute. But Jim, how do you see or not see symptoms of depression in Rhoda?
Yeah, I think what happens, I think with both of us really, is that after an incident where it is very obvious that something has been forgotten, that we kind of grieve that for a while. If it's a small item or a minor thing, then maybe it's a brief grieving. If it's a big thing that's either been forgotten or lost, then it maybe bothers us for longer. But I think, as I say, 90% of the time we just plod along and sort of in a state of denial. But we grieve after the specific instances, and then eventually get better after that.
Yeah. Now, Esther, I want to ask you the same question about depression, because it supposedly contributes to your MCI. So do you perceive yourself as depressed, or what do you experience?
No. We talked about this, and I don't see myself as depressed. I see myself more as angry, frustrated, cheated. but I never used the word depression. And I don't know if people will use them the same or not. I'm very irritable at times. I'm impatient, critical of others, a whole different personality change. And I'm very well aware of this. And then after I do something or say something, I'm very apologetic because I know this isn't me. And because of that, I feel a part of me is lost. So if that's depression, that's what we're still trying to weed through. I lost all sense of smell and taste, and it's been 5 years almost. I had a double mastectomy. I went through 6 solid months of chemotherapy and radiation. And I do not know, you hear the term chemo brain, if that has any effect on me or not. But it seems like it's all come at the same time. So in a nutshell, I'd say, do I feel depressed? No, I'm more angry. I think describes it better.
Right, and you have a couple of different life situations that maybe contribute to that feeling.
Right.
So I'd like to have Joe share how you see Esther.
Well, I think she's depressed. A lot of it is because of her taste, losing her taste and smell. But, you know, she said she gets irritable. To put it bluntly, at times she's a downright. We were driving down the freeway just like a week ago, and she got mad at me for something, and I don't remember what it was, but she opened the door and said she was going to jump out of the car. And that's, you know, going down the freeway at about 65, 70 miles an hour.
Yeah, and one of the things that's really important to recognize is that, especially in older adults, sometimes depression comes out in different ways, not necessarily as being downhearted and blue, but irritability can clearly be a symptom of depression. And there's other ways that depression expresses itself. And Jay, when you get depressed, what's that like for you?
Well, I found there are a number of ways to deal with it, and I think the most important thing this group can do is find out how to cope with depression.
All right, I'm going to interrupt you here because we had that deal. What I know that you have a lot of coping strategies, but right now I'd like you to describe what are you like when you get depressed?
Well, I don't care about anything. I mean, I don't become so with my life or not anything like that. I'm just angry and depressed, and I think part of it is just I've 86 years of life, and I look back on it. But the thing you can do, I can't do.
No, you can't do it. I'm sorry, Jay. One of the things that you had shared with me is that you get little introverted.
This is kind of a conspiracy here.
It is. He told me just before the session, because he also has a caregiver who's here today, that he was being manipulated by 3 women. So,
So they're 3 wonderful women.
So can I get you to talk about how you withdraw?
Withdraw.
When you get depressed?
Oh, I just to the television set, or the better way to get rid of your depression is
All right. You know what? This is... I know. I'm going to let you talk about the secret a little bit later. But Jay told me, I'm going to give away the current secret, which is Jay told me that he gets really introverted and withdraws. And sometimes he's not as nice person.
if you want to know who's not an introvert, it's not me.
Right, usually. Yeah, right? Could you ever guess? So, so Judy, anything else on depression?
No, I don't, and I don't think he's very depressed a lot of the time. I think it's very minimal. And when he is depressed, he's really quiet and he just draws into himself and watches TV, or he drops off and goes to sleep.
Yeah, and so sometimes depression can be really immobilizing. And Steve, we talked a bit about that. Do you want to share how depression has affected you?
Actually, depression is my own worst enemy. It's basically, I spend a lot of time fighting depression because this is my Achilles heel. If a depression gets a hold of me, it can take me down. So I can get around everything except for the depression. So I have to fight it. It's ongoing battle.
Jinsey, you want to share about Steve's depression a little bit?
I had no idea what depression looked like except for the person on TV who blends into the couch, that commercial. And we'd go to the doctor and they'd say, you know, with those parting words, take this prescription, see me in 3 months, and watch for depression. I might as well go watch for that space shuttle. I had no idea. And I just had no clue what even to look for. And it wasn't, frankly, until we were in a class at the Alzheimer's Association, and one day Donna Velarde pulled us aside and said, can I talk to you after? And I thought, I'm so embarrassed to tell you this, but I thought, oh, good, she's going to say how well we're doing. Oh, no, she said, your husband is depressed. I went, he is? Steve, are you depressed? And he had no clue either. So it was after that that we went and got help. But, you know, when you'd go to the pharmacy and pick up the prescription, they'd say, is he going to kill himself? Do you think he's suicidal? Steve, are you going to kill yourself? Honest to God, I had no clue what I was looking for in any of this.
Okay, now we're going to shift gears, and one of the things the panel is going to be really happy we're not going to have enough time to talk about is apathy, because it was quite a controversial topic, because I can tell you that the individuals who have the diagnosis don't think they're apathetic, and in short, the care partners think they are. So it was quite a controversial topic in our group. But one point I do want to make is oftentimes people think that behavioral and psychiatric symptoms don't really occur in MCI. And actually, there have been studies that have been done that symptoms like depression and apathy are very common, and that people with MCI exhibit an average of 9 different behavioral and psychiatric symptoms. So these symptoms start very, very early. Now, the symptoms are very challenging that we've talked about, but what we want to do is shift gears and shift my notes to talk about maybe each one of you could pick out one of the things that's most challenging about living with MCI. And I'm going to go back to Rhoda and ask you what you find most challenging about living with MCI.
Well, right now, I think I pretty well stated this. Give me this. It's remembering. I care a lot. We all do, frankly. But you know, I have a deep sense of my family and my friends, and I care about them very much. And it's very demoralizing in a short period of time, and especially Jim, because we, you know, talk a lot and make plans together and so on, and that I then can't recall it. It is just so hard. I'm disappointed in myself, and I have to resign myself to being a different person now, and not let that aspect of me, which it has got to seem uncaring and thoughtless to others eventually. So I'm very busy kind of covering my tracks, listening real carefully, hoping I can get clues to what they might have been talking about that they shared with me or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's a constant work. Mm-hmm. to not
it takes a lot of effort
to not tip my hand. And of course, if you're talking to someone about anything you care about, why would you consider conversations if it's like, so the person might look you right in the eye and be very interested, but where's their heart? It's there still, mm-hmm. but I can't express that to them, and they don't know what they're dealing with, mm-hmm. in many cases. Mm-hmm. However, I do have my own in-house shrink, so I can, Jim is a psychiatrist, so I get extra listening power.
All right, well, we are actually going to go to each person with MCI first, and Jay, what do you find as one of the most challenging things of living with MCI?
Well, the problem I have is I can't read intelligently and process the words anymore, and that is really a downer for somebody who spent half his life in college and the other half writing things. It's just a downer, and it terribly depresses you. You get to the point where you just don't want to do anything because you pick up your favorite project and it doesn't go anywhere. But can I say the good thing about it?
Absolutely. But I could stop you, you know,
Okay.
but go ahead.
Well, the good thing about it is I had a book that I've been working on, and I stopped before the last page of the book, and I couldn't finish it. I finally had a good day, and the book is finished.
All right. All right. Thank you. That was great. No, don't be sorry. Jay and I have a great relationship. All right. Esther, what's one of the hardest things of living with MCI for you?
The hardest thing I find is in the back of my mind, I keep worrying about it getting worse. For some reason, I have a greater fear of this than I had when I was told I had cancer. And, you know, cancer is like the big sign anyway. But this does bother me. And I pray on this more than anything else that it will get worse. And when I meet people, the one thing I do right away is tell them, please repeat your name or say something a second time, because I do have memory loss. And I have problems forgetting things and stuff. I'm not ashamed to talk about it. The thing that bothers me is that they come back and say, oh, you have Alzheimer's? The world out there needs a lot of education in that respect. But my fear, I would say, is this just bothers me. It's always in the back of my mind.
Right. And just because that word, that awful word dumb, came up earlier,
Right.
one of the things you told me is people, at least how you experience it is,
Right. If I tell somebody I have some problems, and they like I said, they assume it's Alzheimer's or whatever, they think you're dumb, and you can't communicate with them, and they have this visualization of someone, like you said back there, just sitting back and just lounging back and not being able to participate in life, and it isn't true.
right?
And that's what really bothers me. But the fear of it getting worse.
And Steve, what's the hardest thing about, or one of the toughest things about living with MCI for you?
I'm afraid that I'll lose myself. I don't want to lose myself and not be me anymore.
That's pretty scary, huh? Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Steve. So now we're going to come back and ask the care partners the same question. Jim?
I think it's main thing for me is just wondering about the future. I think, again, most of our 90% of our life is as it has been pretty much, and I wonder if I'm just in denial, you know, just going ahead and not thinking about it. Is there something else we should be doing about it? And then, of course, when the incidents happen, it's a little scary, but then just block it out and go ahead.
And Joe, what's hardest for you?
Well, we mentioned irritability. That's one of the things. But another thing is that she repeats herself constantly. We go to a homeowners association meeting, and 3 months in a row she asks the same question of the people, and the people there don't understand that, you know, she's got a memory problem, and that's why she's asking the question.
And Jinsey?
The hardest part is watching the person you love go through this, and there's nothing you can do about it. And in our case, it's also the challenge of maintaining as normal as possible a household for a teenage son.
And Judy?
Well, there's a number of things. The hardest thing for me really is watching my husband change, and I hate to see him. I hate to lose the person that I've known for so many years. Also, we always lived, all of our lives, our 50 years we've been together, we've always led very independent lives, and he did his thing, I did my thing, and we did things together. Now he's very, very dependent on me for daily activities of daily living and for everything, and I'm really kind of his security blanket, so he kind of was always looking to make sure that I'm within vision so he can see me. And that's different for us. Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, you know, Judy's, we don't have a lot of time, but Judy's going to read a poem that expresses what her feelings are.
This was written by somebody, and it's in a book that I really like called A Caregiver's Guide to Lewy Body Dementia. I use it all the time. It's written by another person who's in the same situation as I am. Yesterday, I had a chance encounter with an old flame. He was every bit as charming as I remember, and I was so glad to see him. We had dinner together and talked about everything and nothing at all. Made me feel young again. Yes, I even flirted a little. It was just so nice to spend an evening being normal. I don't recall exactly when he left. I just looked up and John was gone and Louis had returned.
Thank you. You did wonderfully. You did wonderfully. And now we're just going to see if you could pick out, and we talked about coping quite a bit, and maybe pick out one or two of your main coping strategies. So Esther, you already shared that you cope by being open and sharing your memory loss with others, but how else do you cope?
I have to stop and think about it.
Well, I think
I just go day to day, do my activities of daily living, take care of a household, garden, and everything, and probably put it out of my mind because, like I said, I don't like to think about it because then I always think of, oh, it's going to get worse.
And you do mental exercise, don't you?
Oh, yes. I do a lot of mental exercises, physical and the mental. I do a lot of crosswords, word search, all those kind of games, and I feel that's very important. I don't let a night go by without doing those.
All right, pass that on to Joe, would you? And you, what's your main coping strategy?
My main coping strategy is when she gets irritable and mad is just to go outside and do something or go into another room until she cools off and just let it cool down.
Attitude is really important. And Rhoda, I would like you to share some about your attitude. And make sure you have the mic.
I feel like I've sprinkled that in. I focus on what is good. I try to do that now, especially more, and I wasn't naturally that way. Part of it comes through our marriage relationship that I've learned a lot. But I think that focus of being thankful, counting what is the best and trying to discount the things. Well, the alcoholic's prayer: give me the power to accept what I cannot change and take joy in every day, in every friendship and every activity. And there's still lots of wonderful, wonderful things to do and to be.
And Jim, you mentioned sometimes denial is a part of coping.
Right, I think that's probably my main mechanism is just going ahead with the daily activities. And I worry that I'm too much in denial, but I think looking towards helping with groups like this, we'll be engaged in that. But I think, the main concern is what's going to down the road, but mainly I just go ahead and take one day at a time.
Yeah. And Jay, now you got your shot at it. Now you got your shot at what you'd like to say about coping, about what helps you to cope.
Well, the important thing is to not let this thing seize you and destroy you, because depression and apathy and et cetera, are terrible things. But the thing I want to emphasize is, one night I was very depressed and I dropped down and did 15 push-ups and found out I just felt better.
So because we're running out of time, I'm going to let Judy share a couple of the most important strategies, and you know what I'm referring to, Judy.
Yes, I'll go right through them all. We're not doing antipsychotics because it's now more good than it's bad, and when that switches, then we'll talk. He does a lot of exercise. He goes to the gym 1 day a week with a caregiver. He's there for like 2 hours. He spends 15, 20 minutes, half an hour on the treadmill. He lifts weights, does fine. 1 day a week he goes with a caregiver to physical therapy, and they put him through all kinds of activities, and for about an hour. That's really helpful. If he gets really off the wall, We sit down and have a cocktail party. We keep a bottle of port in the bathroom because if something happens in the middle of the night, we just both have a glass of port, and both
Bottle of port, yes.
because we're both cheap drunks, so it doesn't take much. And then if it's really uncomfortable, we watch sitcoms. I tape all the Dick Van Dykes. We go through those. It's really great because I have caregivers now, so they take him out. I belong to a support group, many of whom are here today, which I'm so excited about, and that really helps me as well. And basically, we do a lot of things socially, and the more we get out of the house, because he doesn't feel safe there anyway, so the more we get out of the house, the better it is. And we go places, we do things. Our friends are great. They're very understanding. They're very patient. They get it. They're really nice. And so we do a lot of things with friends and remain active as much as we can socially.
Okay, Jay, real quick, because I'm very quick.
I just want to say, above all, folks, keep your sense of humor.
Yes, absolutely. All right, Steve, you had to make a little attitude adjustment, didn't you?
Yeah, basically, my best thing is I try to act normal. And I try so hard to act normal as I'm taking acting lessons and painting lessons, trying to basically work my hand-eye coordination. And basically the exciting thing about it is I've retired at 55, and I have an exciting life now. I get to watch what everybody else wanted in their life. I get to watch my son grow up and go to his track meets and be involved. And so this has been a gift. I mean, I get to do more stuff now that everybody's working so hard that they can do. I get to do it now instead of when I'm old and won't be able to do it. So this, to me, it's a great advantage.
Yeah, and Jinsey?
Well, Steve's problem actually is not the primary focus in the house because, as I said, we have a son. He'll be 16 in November. That means he's learning to drive. He also runs cross country, so we go to cross country meets. I do volunteer work at a variety of things with the Alzheimer's Association, with the high school, and we're in a support group at Memories in Motion that really helps us out too.
So, just quick, one sentence, take-home message. Jinsey?
If you are a healthcare provider of some type and you want the family to watch for signs of depression in someone, give them a clue what to watch for. I never saw the noose in the kitchen or him using knives on his wrist, so give me something more obvious than that, please, that I can grab onto and watch for.
Take-home message.
Basically, know your limitations. So if you know your limitations, you can expand your horizons.
Joe?
Educate the public and so that they know that the person they're talking to is the same person that they knew before they got this disease.
Esther?
Yeah, I just want to add on to what Joe says. I haven't changed. I'm still like I am, the same person. It's just coping with it.
That's right.
And that's
right.
the main thing.
That's right. Jim?
Our spiritual life has been very important. As Christians, we get a lot of support from that, and just focusing on the positive, of which we are just so thankful for our countless blessings.
Yeah. And Rhoda?
I think I've already said that a lot, but just a thankfulness and counting your blessings and getting in a group like this, if worse comes to worse, or sometimes if better comes to better, who knows. It's a wonderful support.
All right. Judy?
I find a lot of people don't know what Lewy body is. Most people ask me to spell it for them. I've informed people whose spouses have symptoms and said that's probably Lewy body. I've done that with 3 people who no one else had diagnosed. I think people need to become involved. There's a wonderful website by the Lewy Body Dementia Association. It's lbda.org. If you're a caregiver or if you're a medical professional, you need to get up to date on Lewy body because it's misdiagnosed so frequently, and many of the doctors that I've seen don't know very much about it at all.
Okay, Jay, you get to top it off for us. What's your take-home message you want people to remember?
Accentuate the positive.
All right, let's thank everybody for their incredible courage in sharing what they've shared today.